Let me begin by telling you a story. Not too long ago, my wife and I were having a conversation that quickly turned into what we call an intense fellowship. So my wife was challenging me to be a better leader for our ministry and do a better job at planning and getting ahead so that my team was very clear on what we're doing, what videos were coming out, so that our team was not always in this reactive state. But because I saw this as an attack on my leadership, I immediately got defensive, even though inwardly I knew I needed to do a better job, but I just wasn't feeling it. And as a result, I lashed back at my wife. I got defensive and I basically resisted any sort of advice that she was trying to give me. But after thinking about it for a while, I realized that my wife was simply trying to help me be a better leader. She's always been in my corner. She was always my greatest cheerleader, and I was wrong. So, did you know that there is a story in the Bible of a man whose name is Balaam who did something very, very similar? And my goal in this video is that you and I would see ourselves in the story of Balaam. But before we get into that story, context is always important, so let's set it up. In the book of Numbers, the nation of Israel has been in the wilderness for 40 years or so, and as they are on their way to take possession of the promised land, they have to go through a land called Moab. And so as they are traveling through the land of Moab, there is this man whose name is Balak, who is the king of Moab. And Balak has heard that the Israelite God has been fighting their battles for them, and that the Israelites have been wiping out all of the people that they have been fighting against because their Lord has been fighting for them. And so as Balak sees the nation of Israel traveling through Moab, he naturally gets afraid. He feels threatened. He is wondering whether these Israelites are going to do the same thing to the Moabites that they've done to everyone else. And so he calls on a man whose name is Balaam, who has a reputation for cursing people and pronouncing blessings. And he says, "Hey, Balaam, listen, can you pronounce a curse on these people, the nation of Israel, so that they will not wipe us out?" And so Balaam says, "Okay, you know what? Let me check with God and let me see if God will allow me to curse these people." So Balaam says, "Hey, hold on, I'll be right back." So Balaam goes to God, and Balaam basically says, "Hey, God, can I curse these people?" And God says, No, these are my chosen people. You can't curse them because they are blessed." So now Balaam goes back to Balak, the king of Moab, and says, "Hey, bro, I'm sorry, man. I can't curse these people because God said that they are blessed, and I can't curse a group of people that God says is blessed." So Balak wasn't having that. He was like, "You know what? I know what'll get his attention. Money, 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 money," right? So he goes back to Balaam and says, "Hey, check this out. I'll give you anything that you want. I'll give you even more money if you come and you curse these people, because if not, they're gonna take us out." Now, at this point, Balaam should have said, "Hey man, look, God has already spoken. He's already told me what he wants me to do. I can't curse these people." But instead he says, let me think about it. That offer sounds a little enticing. So he goes back and says, "Balak, let me see what else God has to say." So that night he goes back, he prays, and God says, "You know what? Okay, since you're just so bent on going with these people, go ahead and go with them, but only say what I'm going to tell you to say." This is where you and I enter the story. See, it was never God's intent for Balaam to go along with these men. And so Balaam was walking in what's called the permissive will of God and not the perfect will of God. As a matter of fact, it says this: "So the next morning, Balaam got up, saddled his donkey, and started off with the Moabite officials. But God was angry that Balaam was going, so he sent the angel of the Lord to stand in the road to block his way, as Balaam and two servants were riding along." So we see here that God was doing everything that he could to get Balaam's attention because he did not want Balaam to continue down the road of disobedience. Now, this is where the story gets very, very interesting because Balaam's donkey is able to see the angel of the Lord in the road standing there trying to block them from going forward. But Balaam couldn't see it, and the donkey was simply trying to save Balaam unnecessary pain. Notice it says, Balaam's donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with a drawn sword in his hand. The donkey bolted off the road into a field, but Balaam beat it and turned it back onto the road. There are three very important lessons that you and I can learn from this story as we enter into the story of Balaam. Lesson number one is that we all have blind spots. You see, God had placed a roadblock in Balaam's path to get his attention, to let him know that he was going down the path of disobedience. But the problem is that he could not see this because he was so dead set on doing what he wanted to do. And so God was trying his best to get his attention. And oftentimes that's the same way it is in our lives. There are certain things that we may want to do that are not good for us. And God will send other people in our lives to let us know that there are some blind spots. There are some roadblocks that we need to pay attention to, because if we don't, we are heading down the road of disaster and disobedience. Maybe it's a relationship that you're in right now and you can't see that you need to get out of that relationship, but other people around you are able to see those blind spots and they're able to see that this person is no good for you. Or maybe it's a situation where you're not being a good husband or good wife to your spouse and you can't seem to see it, even though other people, even your spouse, has been trying to tell you how you need to change. You need other people to come alongside and point out some of your blind spots, because God has been trying to get your attention all along the way. Maybe it's a financial decision that you are trying to make and you're so dead set on something that you want so badly, but God has been getting your attention and he's saying, hey, you have some blind spots. I'm trying to block your way. Whatever it is, all of us have blind spots and we need people in our lives who can see things that we just don't see. But the story gets even more interesting because even though there was this roadblock, Balaam was committed to doing what he wanted to do. Notice what it says. It says, then the angel of the Lord stood at a place where the road narrowed between two vineyard walls. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, it tried to squeeze by and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall. So Balaam beat the donkey again. Lesson number two, the more you and I disobey God and ignore his warning signs in our lives, the harder our lives will be. So I want you to notice something that's happening in this story. The first time Balaam's donkey was going along and he saw the angel of the Lord, and so he did not want to run into the angel of the Lord, so he turned off into a field. In other words, there was enough space for him to get off of the road into the field. Now I want you to notice this time, the angel of the Lord is standing in the same road, but now there are walls on both sides of this donkey, so much so that there's not enough space for the donkey to turn off into the field because there are walls on both sides. And so therefore, the donkey just tries to get as close to the wall and try to avoid the angel of the Lord. And in doing so, Balaam's foot was crushed up against the wall. Imagine it like a tunnel. If you have a car that's a one-lane tunnel going through, a car that's going through a one-lane tunnel, and there's nowhere to turn. You can't turn off into a road. There's nowhere to go, but there's an angel of the Lord standing in the middle there, and you have just enough space to kind of get around it. That's basically what's happening. So what's happening here is that God is making it more difficult for Balaam to disobey. And my friend, when you and I are going down the road of disobedience, pay attention to the warning signs, pay attention to the lack of peace that you have, pay attention to the messages that other people are trying to send you, pay attention to the circumstances that might be going on in your life to get your attention, because the longer you go down this path of disobedience, the more difficult it will be for you. But because many of us are walking in pride, we are going down this road of disobedience, completely ignoring any advice from anyone else, even though there's something deep within us that probably knows that what we're doing is wrong. But the story gets even more interesting. Notice it says this, then the angel of the Lord moved farther down the road and stood in a place too narrow for the donkey to get by at all. This time, when the donkey saw the angel, it lay down under Balaam. In a fit of rage, Balaam beat the animal again with his staff. Notice once again, it gets more difficult for Balaam to persist in his disobedience because at this point, it is so narrow of a road that the donkey cannot go off into the field. The donkey cannot go off into the side of the wall, pressing Balaam's foot against the wall. It is so narrow that there is no wiggle room for the donkey to go. And as a result, the donkey says, I don't want to run into this angel. I'm just going to lay down and fall down. And Balaam still can't see it, even though it's the third time that the angel of the Lord's been trying to get his attention. And he beats the donkey and he doesn't see what God is trying to do in his life. And this leads me to the third and final lesson. And that is the fact that oftentimes we are guilty of lashing back at the people who are simply trying to help us and they love us the most. Because Balaam couldn't see what God wanted him to see, he took his anger out on his donkey, this donkey who had always treated him well and wanted nothing but the best for him. And many times, my friend, you and I are guilty of doing the same thing. There are people that God has sent in your life, and if you are honest about it, you know that those people have your back. You know that they want the best for you. You know that they're not trying to hinder you. They're simply trying to help you. But oftentimes we are walking in such pride that we resist any advice that they give us, and we persist in our disobedience, and we take our anger out on them when in actuality, we're probably angry at God because inwardly we know that the direction that we're going is not a direction that we need to go. Notice what it says. Then the Lord gave the donkey the ability to speak. What have I done to you that deserves your beating me these 3 times? It asked Balaam. You have made me look like a fool, Balaam shouted. If I had a sword with me, I would kill you. But I am the same donkey you have ridden all your life, the donkey answered. Have I ever done anything like this before? No, Balaam admitted. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the roadway with a drawn sword in his hand. Balaam bowed his head and fell face down on the ground before him. I want you to notice here that Balaam's donkey was simply trying to plead with Balaam and say, hey, look, haven't I always been the same donkey that you've rode before? Haven't I always done right by you? Haven't I always had your back? And you know, sometimes God will send a message to us through other people, but because it doesn't come from someone that we expect, we don't receive it. I can imagine that Balaam did not expect for God to be using his donkey to send a message to him. And for some of us, if our pastor comes to us with a message, we will receive it. If a church leader comes to us, we will receive it. If our coach comes to us or a teacher comes to us, we will receive it. But if you're a young person and your parents are coming to you with a message, you don't receive it. If you're a married person, your spouse is trying to get your attention and tell you something, you don't receive it. If you're a parent and your children are trying to show you something because you don't see them on the same level as somebody else that you quote unquote respect, somebody that you can that can speak into your life, you don't receive it. Listen, my friend. Beware, because God may be trying to use somebody that you don't expect to get a very, very important message to you that very well may save your life. Well, the story ends like this. It says, why did you beat your donkey those 3 times? The angel of the Lord demanded. Look, I have come to block your way because you are stubbornly resisting me. 3 times the donkey saw me and shied away. Otherwise, I would certainly have killed you by now and spared the donkey. Then Balaam confessed to the angel of the Lord, I have sinned. I didn't realize you were standing in the road to block my way. I will return home if you are against my going. So what is the overall lesson of this story? All of us need to stop walking in pride. And we need to realize that all of us have blind spots in our lives. We need to remember that the more we go down the road of disobedience, the harder it is going to be because God is trying to get our attention by any means necessary. And then finally, we need to be open to whatever message and messenger that God may be wanting to use in our lives to get a message to us instead of simply seeing them as an ass. Yes, I said it. Because this person that we see as simply an ass could be the person that God is sending into our lives to save our very lives. So the question is, are we going to receive the message in humility or continue to walk in pride? I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.